March 1947. Death row, Sapporo prison. The guards swing open cell 7 expecting to find a condemned man staring at the ceiling, and instead they find emptiness. A mattress that looks slightly too thick, a ceramic soup bowl on the floor, smeared with blood, and in the corner where there should only be wood planks there's a fresh, gaping hole cut straight through the floor. For a full 10 seconds nobody speaks, because the brain refuses to accept the simplest conclusion. A man on death row just vanished downward. If you enjoy stories where impossible is only a temporary problem, hit subscribe right now, because the next few minutes are about the most humiliating escape streak Japan's prison system ever suffered, and the one moment that makes it all stop. After 4 legendary breakouts, the man finally surrendered to a random beat cop for 1 cigarette. His name was Yoshie Shiratori, and this wasn't his first escape. It wasn't even his second. This was his 4th. They called him a ghost, a phantom, the prisoner who made wardens redesign their buildings after he left. Each time they caught him, they threw him into something worse: higher walls, colder air, slicker surfaces, tighter cuffs, because surely the next cage would be the one that finally broke him. But what really broke the system was this. Yoshie didn't escape with explosives, weapons, or some genius contraption smuggled in from the outside. He escaped with ordinary things: a piece of wire, his own saliva, frozen miso soup, and a soup bowl. So how did a ceramic bowl defeat death row? And why did the greatest escape artist in the country eventually give himself up because a stranger offered him a cigarette? To understand that, you have to go back to June 15, 1936, Aomori prison. Yoshie is 29 years old, 3 years into a life sentence for allegedly killing a farmer named Tanaka during a robbery. Yoshie insists he didn't do it the way they claim. The court didn't care. In the Japan of the 1930s, a poor man's truth weighs less than an official stamp. But inside his cell, Yoshie does the only thing that makes sense. He calculates. Option 1. Rot quietly in prison until the years erase your name. Option 2. Attempt escape and risk execution if you fail. To Yoshie, the math is simple. He slides a thin copper wire into the lock. Not a fancy tool, not a key. Just wire hidden, saved, and practiced with until it becomes an extension of his fingers. He's rehearsed the motion hundreds of times. Not on the real lock, but on a soap carving of the mechanism he made in secret. The soap has turned his cell into a laboratory, his boredom into repetition, his fear into muscle memory. Click, the bolt retracts. Now comes the part where most people panic and make noise. Yoshie doesn't. He sets a trap for the guard's eyes first. 4 wooden floorboards go under his blanket, shaped into the silhouette of a sleeping man. In the pre-dawn dimness, it'll pass for a body during the 5 a.m. Check. Maybe the 6 a.m. Check too. Every minute matters, because Yoshie knows the patrol schedule better than the guards. Officer Yamamoto takes 47 seconds to walk the north corridor. Officer Sato skips the 3rd floor check when it rains. And right now at 4:33 a.m., all 6 guards are in the break room arguing about baseball. Above Yoshie's cell, 18 feet up, is a skylight, a 2-foot square of freedom. Maintenance forgot to bar it properly. Yoshie found it while working a prison job cleaning rafters. The foreman never noticed Yoshie quietly testing beams, measuring distances, memorizing angles. That's the thing about desperate people. They don't look for hope in the obvious places. They look for flaws. He climbs. Fingers find tiny holes where concrete meets wood. His muscles burn, not because he's weak, but because he's been training in secret for months. Pull-ups on the doorframe, plank holds against the wall, isometric tension like a man preparing for war. His father was a fisherman. When Yoshie was a kid, punishment meant being forced to hang from boat rigging for 10 straight minutes. Childhood cruelty turned into adult survival. He reaches the skylight and yanks. The wooden frame splits with a sharp crack. Yoshie wedges himself through, ribs scraping splintered wood, and suddenly he's on the roof, the city sleeping below. No searchlights. Not yet. He drops 20 feet into the vegetable garden, his ankles exploding with pain. He doesn't scream. He limps toward a hole in the fence he cut during a work detail the day before. 72 hours. That's all he gets. Hunger drives him to raid a hospital supply room, bandages, rice balls, anything. A police officer catches him mid-theft. The tackle breaks 2 ribs. Back in court, the judge adds 20 years and leans forward like he wants the words to stab harder. You embarrass the empire. They send Yoshie to Akita prison to teach him humility. Akita's special cell is designed by an architect who studied Houdini. The walls are polished, metal smooth, reflective, cruel. No handholds, no rough edges. The logic is simple. Eliminate friction, eliminate hope. When Yoshie arrives in 1941, he weighs 132 pounds. 6 months later, he's down to 108. The handcuffs never come off. Not even when he uses the toilet. His wrists develop permanent grooves. Guards force him to sleep with arms crossed, so if he rolls over, his shoulders dislocate. They want him to beg for mercy. Instead, Yoshie counts ceiling bolts. 47 bolts, arranged like a constellation Orion staring back at him from above. And near the top of the wall is a vent with iron bars set into wood. The iron is strong, but the wood is rotting. Most prisoners would see a vent and think, no way. Yoshie sees wood and thinks time. Summer humidity expands it. Winter freezes contract it. Every cycle weakens the frame by a tiny amount. A tiny amount is everything if you have nothing else. So Yoshie accelerates the process. At night, he slips his skeletal hands out of cuffs, a trick that costs him skin on his thumbs, and climbs the impossible wall using pressure. Back against one side, feet against the other. Spine as a wedge. The polished metal should make climbing physically impossible, but impossible is different when your life is the price. He moistens the wooden frame with spit and sweat in the summer. He loosens, screws a quarter turn per week with fingernails. Not enough to notice, enough to accumulate. Below, guards play cards and talk about the war, never looking up. Why would they? Nobody can climb polished metal. Then June 14th, 1942 arrives with a typhoon. 70-mile-per-hour winds, flooding corridors, thunder that shakes the building. At 2:15 a.m., between lightning strikes, Yoshie makes his move. The weakened wood tears free with a sound like a snapping bone masked by thunder. The opening is meant for ventilation pipes, not a human body. Yoshie forces himself through anyway. His shoulders dislocate. His ribcage compresses until breathing turns into panic. He keeps going. He emerges onto the roof naked except for a loincloth because clothing would make him too thick for the hole. A searchlight sweeps past, missing him by 3 feet. He drops from the wall, lands wrong, fractures his ankle, and then he runs 16 miles on that broken bone, bleeding into the storm while rain erases the trail. He stays free for 3 months until infection and hunger finally drop him in a cabbage field. Farmers find him half dead. This time the authorities don't just want him contained. They want him to disappear. They send him north to Abashiri prison on Hokkaido's coast, where winter can kill a man in hours. It's where Japan sends people to be forgotten. 18-foot granite walls, guard towers every 30 yards, dogs trained to track through blizzards. And Yoshie's cell has one extra feature. Every surface is coated in whale oil that never freezes, making it impossible to grip even with fingernails. The warden personally inspects the cell, smiling like he's sealing a tomb. Winter arrives early. Ice forms inside. Yoshie's breath crystallizes and falls like snow. They give him no blanket until December. His body starts eating itself to survive. The guards think they've done it. They think nature will finish what walls couldn't. But cold does something interesting to metal. It contracts. In Yoshie's door, there's a food slot. Steel. 4 inches by 12 inches. In extreme cold, it shrinks by a few millimeters. A few millimeters is nothing, unless you've spent months dislocating your joints every night, training your body to compress like a nightmare. Yoshie begins with his shoulders. Pop, set, pop again. Then collarbones pressing them down until they overlap behind the sternum. Then the ribcage compressing the chest until lungs can barely hold air. Hips rotate until ligaments scream. Most people would faint from shock. Yoshie doesn't. He learned pain early when debt collectors broke his arms and he had to reset them himself. On November 3rd, 1944, the temperature bottoms out. The slot has contracted as far as it will. Yoshie fasts for days to shrink his stomach. Then he goes headfirst through steel. Bones grind against metal. Breath becomes a tool. Exhale to flatten, inhale to endure. 20 minutes of torture for 12 inches of freedom. Something tears in his hip socket like fabric ripping. He drops into the corridor, a grotesque stack of dislocated joints and torn muscle, and has to reset himself like a broken machine. Walking is impossible. He crawls. A corridor guard is smoking in the bathroom, an error that costs him his career. Yoshie reaches the outer fence as dawn approaches. And here comes the part that sounds stupid until you understand how desperate people think. Miso soup. He's been saving it for weeks. In the cold, it freezes solid. He warms it with friction, rubbing until it liquefies. Then he pours it over. Fence bolts, in -30 weather. Thermal shock. Expansion. Brittle wartime steel, cracking under stress. A bolt gives. The fence opens, and Yoshie crawls into the wilderness wearing prison rags, bleeding into fresh snow. 6 months later, they find him in an abandoned mine shaft, living on rats and melted snow. This time, he doesn't resist arrest. His hip never healed right. He will limp forever. Tokyo District Court is done playing games. They sentence him to death, not only for crimes, but for the humiliation he has inflicted on the prison system. 1947. The war is over. Japan is occupied. Standards are changing. But Yoshie's reality is the same. A cell, a rope, and time running out. Sapporo Prison's death row is built cheap in the post-war mess. Wooden planks over dirt. Guards are veterans missing limbs, carrying trauma running on routine because routine is the only thing that feels stable. They check cells hourly until midnight, then every 2 hours until dawn. They never check floors, because why would they? Every escape in their minds goes up or out, never down. And that assumption is exactly where Yoshie lives. All he has is a ceramic soup bowl, not sharp enough to cut, but rough enough to scrape. He chips the edge, then works it against floorboards for hours, nights, weeks. A groove becomes a gap becomes a hole. Digging is mathematics. The body produces about 2 cups of urine a day. Urine softens dirt. Soft dirt compresses better, and compressed dirt hides easier. Yoshie digs at night and hides dirt in his mattress by day. The mattress thickens by millimeters. Guards assume he's hoarding food. They search for contraband. They find nothing. Below their boots, a tunnel extends slowly, quietly about a foot a week. But tunnels collapse unless you reinforce them. So Yoshie does something nobody wants to imagine. He mixes straw from his mattress with his own waste to make primitive concrete, smearing it along walls as support. The smell is monstrous. The guards blame the latrine. They laugh about the broken prisoner who barely moves. 2 months pass. Then 3. The tunnel reaches beyond the prison wall, and Yoshie hits groundwater. The shaft floods. Digging deeper is impossible, so he changes the angle. 40 degrees upward based on soil density in the water table. A man without tools doing engineering in the dark because his life depends on it. On March 31st, 1947, he breaks the surface in the prison vegetable garden. He emerges at 3 a.m., covered in mud and filth, looking less like a man and more like a warning. The searchlight is broken, has been for weeks waiting on parts that never arrive. The main gate isn't locked because who expects someone to come from inside the compound? Yoshie walks out. That should be the ending, right? The impossible man vanishes again. The system humiliated. The legend complete. But here's the twist. Freedom lasts 1 year, and during that year, Yoshie commits no crimes, no robberies, no revenge, no chaos. He works under false names as a day laborer. He sends anonymous money to his daughter. He keeps his head down and lives quietly, like a man trying to remember what normal feels like. Then May 5th, 1948 Maruyama Park, Sapporo. Yoshie sits on a bench watching salarymen hurry to work. He looks homeless, thin, older than he should be. A police officer named Kobayashi walks his beat and offers him a cigarette. It's an American brand, Lucky Strikes. In occupied Japan, that's valuable. That tiny act of kindness does something walls never could. It doesn't scare Yoshie. It doesn't crush him. It doesn't threaten him. It treats him like a person. Yoshie takes the cigarette, lights it, inhales once, and says, "I'm Yoshie Shiratori. I escaped from Sapporo prison last year. Kobayashi nearly drops his nightstick. Every cop has heard the stories: the ghost who crawled through a food slot, the phantom who dug his way out of death row with a soup bowl. Kobayashi expects violence. A fight. Another sprint into the night. Instead, Yoshie extends his wrists for cuffs. "I'm tired," he says. "And you were kind." The arrest report notes the suspect surrendered voluntarily and requested no special treatment, except one cigarette for the road. Now ask yourself, why? Why does a man who can defeat steel, cold, and concrete finally surrender for something as small as a cigarette from a stranger? Because Yoshie's escapes were never only about freedom. They were about dignity. Every prison they sent him to tried to erase him, strip him, starve him, chain him, freeze him, humiliate him. Every escape was his way of saying, "You don't get to turn me into an object. You don't get to decide I'm less than human." But that cigarette? That was the first time in years someone treated him like a human without demanding something in return. And that's the part most systems never understand. Brutality creates desperate men. Dignity creates citizens. In June 1948, the High Court convenes. The courtroom overflows journalists, citizens, prison officials who want to see the famous escape artist finally hang. But Japan is under American oath.